Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Write the Future podcast. I'm your host, Beth Barany. I'm a writing teacher, coach, editor, and also science fiction and fantasy writer. I'm excited to bring two people who together make one unit. They told me they're one brain. I'm so excited to bring you both in. We have Emily Golden and Rachel May. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Let me read your bio so everyone can know who you are. Emily Golden and Rachel May are the founders of Golden May. Their joint love of amazing stories and mutual fascination with writing craft evolved into a book coaching business devoted to helping tenacious writers develop the unique writing craft, process, and mindset that works for them, because every writer is different. If you're ready to stop fighting what your writing life should look like and start dreaming about what's possible for you, they're the coaches for you. I love your bio so much. I am totally in line with your philosophy.
Welcome to Golden May. Thank you. Happy to have you. Listen, take you in. Going in. We are now Golden May Barany. We edit, we coach, we write.
We have a community.
That's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. Well, let me put myself on the spotlight here and ask you the first question. And this will be free flowing. Since I help primarily science fiction and fantasy writers, but also character-driven writers, something that people struggle with, and also I never come up with until I'm in editing toward final edits, and sometimes not even then, which is theme. Some people get a little angsty about themes. Some people are really good at deciding what is their story theme, but some people really do have a message also. So how would you distinguish theme versus message? How do you define theme? And I guess my big question is also, why theme? How is it important?
Do you want to start, Emily?
Sure, yeah, I could take it.
Great.
Yeah, so theme is one of those things that I really struggle with because it's so amorphous, right? It's just this, what are your themes? And so we often talk about what Lisa Cron calls a story point, where it's the message of your story, essentially, right? That's how Lisa defines a story point, is you have something that you're trying to teach your reader or through your characters, right? Your character learns a lesson and therefore your reader learns the lesson through their experience. And so it's this takeaway from your story. It's what your story is about at its core. And then I like to think of theme as sort of the pieces of the story point. So I wrote down some examples because I feel like it's the definitions card. So let's say if we take the first Game of Thrones novel, for instance, right? We have the story point of that book is that there's no room for honor in the game for power. And so the themes that are kind of baked into that story point are themes of power. We're going to explore like, what is power? What is honor? How are those things related? Things of politics and the games that are played in politics. And so I like to think of your story doesn't usually have one theme. It's usually looking at the intersections of different themes, right? The intersection of family and love, or the intersection of perfection and belonging, right? And exploring how those themes work together. And so I think oftentimes when folks try to start with theme, it feels a little bit too amorphous. But if you can start to think through what is the actual takeaway that I want my book to have, then you get to explore what are the themes that are baked into that, and are those the themes that I want to explore. Anything to add, Rachel?
I remember learning that theme in like 8th grade, right? Where your English teacher asks you to read a novel and tell me, what are the themes of this book? And you're like, I have no clue. I think that carries into this process of like, I wish I could tell you what they are. And I know when I first started writing, I remember very distinctly filling out like a character interview sheet or like a novel planning sheet. And one of the questions was, what are the themes of this book? And being like, hell if I know. I don't know. I haven't written it yet. So I really align with what you were saying, Beth, of sometimes I don't think you can truly see what this book is about until you've read it. I remember feeling like if I don't know what it's about, how am I ever going to write it? But I think the difference of when I learned what the story point was, when I went into Lisa Cron's teachings and understood that is a specific message that you aim towards that gives your story cohesiveness, then I started to understand, okay, so if the point of my story is that love heals all wounds, and I want my reader to learn that, and I want my characters to learn that, then I have something to aim towards with my story choices. But if I just say this story is about love, okay, what about love? How? Why? Like, where are we going? So I think getting more specific with a story point or with the message of your story just helps you focus. It gives you some focus and it gets refined over time. I don't think I ever truly know what the themes of my story are or even what the message of my story is until after the second or like the first draft, the second draft. I think I usually go into it with like, I'm aiming for something like this. Let's see what happens because it changes, it shifts, especially for me when my characters take on life and a journey of their own and their flaws come to light. So it's very impactful to give your story cohesiveness, but there's not any one right place where you need to know what it is. I think discover these things and they firm up the further you get into the process.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate what you're all saying here about theme and message because I have clients who angst about this, who worry about this. And I co-teach with my husband and he usually decides on theme as he's planning because he's more of a plotter. Whereas I discover it toward the end of revisions. And then again, also sometimes not even until the book is published. And people are like, oh, you're writing about this. And I just want to shout out to Lisa Crone. I have her books. I met her. I love Wired for Story. I have 2 of her other books, which I haven't yet read. But I am often referring to things that she said as well. And so it's really wonderful that you're both using her material. I think it's so rich.
Yeah. The Story Point, we learned a lot from Story Genius. So totally recommend that book. Wired for Story is incredible. But I think all of the tools that she has for baking into story is just all about they're parts of the whole. So it's about strengthening the whole by understanding what are you doing with the story? Why are we here? Why do we care?
Yeah.
And then when you tighten all those pieces up, which world building is one of those pieces that we're going to talk about today, you end up getting a really powerful and meaningful and like resonant, memorable story.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that so much. So yeah, let's move a little bit more into world building. This is definitely my domain. I'm teaching a class on setting. I talk a lot about world building in this podcast. And obviously, as a science fiction and fantasy writer, this consumes me because I'm in love with thinking about these things. So why should writers tie the cultures in your world, in your story world, even if it's contemporary, to your themes? Let's talk about the importance of why.
Yeah, I think why goes back to similar why vein of theme in general, which is just to have a message, to have a point gives us cohesiveness, it gives the story direction, and tying the world building back to that it can really aid in number one, enforcing that message, like making it clear on the page, helping your characters learn it, but also it helps it stay on track. So if we have like a culture that feels really beautifully built out, we put so much effort into building it, but it has nothing to do with the point of what you're trying to say, there's going to be friction there. There's going to be confusion points. So what does it look like? How? We'll get into that, but to give you like an example, if I'm telling a story about empowering women to stand up and claim their space in their world. And to do that, they need to have power. Then I might have a world that systemically takes away from women's power. I might have a world that's built around maybe a magic system that's built around women's pain, or maybe like a cultural system that puts women lower in the social strata. And that's not like unheard of. Like I feel like a pretty common world building structure. But that's a world building that ends up getting tied to story's themes because the whole world is about women being told they're less than. And our journey of change is about breaking that system apart, and making a new system where women are not less than. But if I had this women learning about women empowerment and going on this journey of change, but then their world is women are at the top and yay, nothing about that would be wonderful. Yay, utopia. But women are at the top, or like our magic system maybe has to do with water. Okay, that's cool. But like, why? What's the meaning behind that? And how does this tie to the point? If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. But if it does, you're creating a cohesive experience like where all these different parses, all these different parts or pieces working together. The parses are working together.
I love it. This channel could be a new concept. Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's got my wheels turning. How about you, Emily? Do you have anything to add about why we need
Yeah. I think so much of it comes down to character, right? Because the message of your story is usually something that your character needs to learn, whether they have a positive or negative arc, right? The message of the story is the thing that they need to learn, which means that they have opposite beliefs that are preventing them, flawed beliefs that are preventing them from learning the story message. And so for them to have flawed beliefs that are the opposite of the story point, and for them to go on this journey and need to have to learn the story point, then you almost have to bake in the themes into the world anyway, because the world is where they get their beliefs from, if that makes sense. So if you have a character who believes that they have to be perfect in order to be loved, kind of basic, then, right, who's teaching them that? Probably their culture, their society. And they have to learn the opposite of that, right? Some story point about how striving for perfection or something prevents love, or that might be the message of the story. I think a lot of people accidentally, quote unquote, nothing's an accident in writing. But I do think this is why oftentimes a pantser will reach the end of their novel and be like, oh, there actually are themes in here, right? Because everything is connected, right? Your character believes certain things because the world has taught them those things. And so you end up with more in your novel, even when you're not intending, plotting everything out, because all those things are tied together.
Oh, yes. So I agree with you so much. And I can see as I'm in the middle, like a plotzer, do some planning, and then a lot of follow my nose, follow my characters, follow my heart. That it's a struggle in edits and revisions to go, okay, I'm really in, my intuition is saying create the world like this. My character is in this frame of mind at the beginning of the story. I know roughly her character arc from here to there. I'm in this place where, like in revisions, the setting needs to be acting a bit more upon my character. The world, she's in a new location, a new space station. So she's a stranger in this place, and it's impacting her and it's starting to shift her, change her in ways that she does not understand. And me as the writer in revisions, I'm like, okay, I haven't nailed it yet. I haven't made the setting specific enough, and I haven't made what's going on with her a little clear enough. Some of my beta readers are like, wait, what's going on? It feels like you're spending too much time on her interior life. I know that the reason they're saying that is because we don't know where she's going. The reader is lost. And if the reader is lost, that means I haven't made the connections because I haven't quite decided on what they are yet. I'm just feeling my way through it still. To help writers bring it more explicit, and obviously I'm chewing on this right now, how can world building be used to amplify your character's change arc? And how can we more specifically tie it to theme also? I just also want to underscore, I totally love what you said about how the character's problem, the character's limited belief, and it's baked right into their environments, from their culture, their upbringing, all the things, right? The mix of nature, nurture, the mix of received and perceived beliefs from everything around them and the people around them, and the history and everything that came into the moment where they get to experience their life. I try to write character change stories, transformation stories. I'm writing mysteries. So that often in those stories, the main character doesn't change a lot. But this book is actually meant to be like a big pivot book from the previous 4 books that are published into kind of a new orientation for my character, but not totally new, but new enough. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. I'm curious. As you can see, I'm always working on my story. Yeah, so that interplay, I guess we're talking about how can the world building of the science fiction and fantasy world be used more specifically for character change, what in the environment is impacting on the character and how they can change, and then connecting that back to theme.
I think there's a lot of different ways to, there's a lot of entry points. So what we've talked about a lot is figuring out what your story point is, whether that's you do it now or you do it after your first or second draft, whatever. But having that story point message, however refined, gives you a center point for an interconnected web, right? How you're going to tie all these things together. And so I think if you're starting with a brand new idea, I would ask, what is the thing that is exciting you about the story? And so for some people, that's the character and the wound that they have. For other people, it's a cool part of the world. And that's awesome, right? If you know, this is not how it worked for me, or my series that's out, Behind the Crimson Curtain, my main character can change her face. That's the only magic that's in the world is face changing. I actually didn't start with the face changing. That came in like second draft of the first act. No, my point is I didn't start there, but I could have started there. And if I had started there, right? Oh, I have this idea for a story where I want my main character, I want her to be able to change her face. It's like, okay, that's cool. What themes are baked into that magic, right? Well, you've got themes of deception, you have themes of truth, like who is she really? And you can start to follow that path to like, okay, what kind of journey, like what kind of arc of change could I send that character who can do that magic on, right? And you can enter that way through the world if that's where your interest starts. Or, as actually happened with me, I had a character who I knew I wanted to be a con artist. She came to me as a con artist, and I knew she wanted to be someone who lies to everybody about who she is. And so then I was able to be like, okay, what magic could she have? She could change her face, right? And so there's just like a lot of ways that you can enter the web, but making sure that all of your choices are connected and thematically intersect, I think, is the way to build a cohesive story.
I love that. Yeah, it makes me think about how the whole reason I built this space station is that I wanted people to come together with an idealistic vision. And so my attention goes, okay, I need to go back to that backstory. I've come up with the character, who's the builder, who she is, where she comes from, and then how she makes it happen and why she makes it happen. It predates my story by 80, 90 years, something like that. But it is baked into the physical environment that my main character is walking around in. And it is a part of the story that is still not completely locked in, which is my critique partners are like, where are we? Do you have a map of this place? By their questions, I can tell there's a big hole here that I need to design so that even though my main character doesn't know where she is and is discovering the location as she travels and meets people, etc., that me as the world builder, I know what it is. And so to do that, I have to go and create a little better the whole origin story of the place, which is in like broad strokes right now. So I know as soon as once I lock that in, and it's not just how it was built, and it's also with what was it built. And so because I have this little plant thing going on, and it impacts the present of the stories. That's where I need to go. The creation process. Thank you for letting me share. And Rachel, did you have anything to add to this idea, the interplay between world and character arc and theme?
I 100% agree. And what I would add is probably like a 201. Like, what's next? We feel interconnected. And I think in like speculative worlds, there are a lot of times there's more than one culture. So how do we play with that? How do we build multiple cultures? How are all of these different cultures staying in conversation with our message or our point? How are we going to connect them all? And I think one of the biggest questions that help me, especially in my early days, but even now and in the way that I coach writers, is a simple old why. Why are we doing that? I hate it. I hate it being asked why, because you're telling me I have to explain myself. But I do think that asking that question, why, is very helpful and very impactful. When I first met Emily, we met as critique partners. We met on Twitter, and that's how we grew a relationship. And then we decided, oh, we should become coaches after a while. But we met as critique partners, and one of the first things that she asked me, why? And I was like, I don't, because. And like, unfortunately, because isn't a great response.
Yeah.
So, like, I had a world where there was a nuclear war, and then in the fallout of that, people gained magic abilities. And then the whole backdrop of the world. And then Emily would be like, why? And I'm like, because that's just what happened. Sorry. But the reason that question existed was because it had nothing to do with my character's journey. That was an interesting thing about the world, was that there was nuclear war and then suddenly people could use magic. But what did that have to do with the characters in my world? So why is a really good one. And I think asking that question to multiple different cultures can introduce a lot of really interesting conflict. I think conflict is also part of culture, and conflict is part of journeys of change. So they work really well together. So if you have multiple cultures, how are they different? Why? Or even within a culture, is there conflict? What's it like? Are there multiple factions? How is that conflict shaped your characters? And how do they live within that conflict? And it doesn't have to be huge. There's so many different kinds of conflict. There's oppression, and then there's also conflict where you're taught that if you express yourself, you get in trouble. There's so many different kinds of conflict, which can create really interesting culture. So however many you feel like you have, we're still asking that question. Why? How did this happen? How did this create our characters? How does this tie into the journey that we're going on?
That's great. This is so fascinating. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this, especially writers out there. If you are total pantser or somewhere in between, or even someone who tends to plan ahead of time, but then your story gets away from you. I think if you can hear from what Rachel and Emily are saying about the interplay, it keeps shifting and changing as we work on our revisions. I hope writers, you'll take away from it that, revisions, it's a process. And I love back to your original message in your bio, like there isn't one right way to go about writing a book. I tell my clients this all the time and my students. It's really our job is to learn our own process and to really embrace what's working and come from strengths, my perspective anyway. And so a lot of the work I do as a coach is helping people excavate their own like interests and that thread, that kind of like magical, fizzy, electric, passionate golden thread that is their guide, and helping them find their own, to use another metaphor, similes, North Star, and help them really trust themselves. And so I really feel like you both are coming from that perspective as well. It's so beautiful. So I have a little lightning round question then. I would love to find out from each of you, when you hear how to write the future, what does that mean to you?
I think to me, it means like, I mean, obviously there's looking ahead, but there's looking ahead with hope or trepidation or concern or fear. And I think there's a lot of different ways to look at the future. And where we're saying with our stories, we're like exploring those emotions, just like, what will it be like? And how do I feel about that? Do I want it to be that way, a different way? What can I picture? So I hope I am always going to be a glass half full kind of person. So even though there are more than likely going to be big problems in the future, I also think that there still will be humans with big hearts and big hope. And so that's what I think about when writing the future. I would want my stories to speak to that.
Yeah. It makes me think, I feel like all science fiction and fantasy in some way, shape, or form, right? Because we're reimagining the world in some way, shape, or form. And I think they're all exercises in what could the world look like, even with magic and all that stuff, right? It's really about the people. It's about the relationships, the connections, like who's in power? What does that look like? Who has power? How is it used? And so I feel like those are the big questions that these genres specifically look at. And there's a lot of imagination that can be used to kind of project, right? We're exploring what could happen. What do we want to happen? And I think that's important. I think it's really important, especially as things fall apart. We have to put them back together. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. And I love what you both said there. So thought-provoking. I really do believe fiction is where we get to explore and we get to play and we get to ask what if. And we also get to try it on, like children who do dress up. Stories are a way for us as writers, but obviously also for the readers to go, oh yeah, I want to explore what could I do in that situation, or how could I be, and what could I learn? And thank you, character, for going through that hardship.
Yeah.
So I don't have to.
Yeah, it's a safe place to explore those what ifs. Yeah.
Yeah. I have enjoyed this conversation so much with you both, and I look forward to continuing more conversations. I'm going to be on your podcast, right? At some point?
Yeah. Sometime real soon.
Tabling stories, we can talk about writing, world building, anything.
That's so great. I'd love it. Okay. I'm going to say thank you so much both for coming on How to Write the Future. And I'm going to do my typical sign off for everyone. Write long and prosper. And that's a wrap.